Execution by tank is one of the most brutal and dehumanizing forms of execution recorded in modern history. Unlike more traditional methods, such as hanging or shooting, this form of execution leverages the sheer weight and mechanical dominance of armoured vehicles to deliberately crush a human body beneath metal tracks. It is not only an act of killing, but a calculated performance of state or militant power, a spectacle designed to terrify, subjugate, and make a public example of perceived enemies. Though rare and not institutionalized in the same way as a guillotine or gallows, execution by tank has been employed in extreme regimes, civil wars, and moments of political vengeance. It evokes visceral horror, not only because of its gruesome nature, but because of what it reveals about the regimes that use it, an unflinching commitment to terror as a tool of control. To support our channel, please subscribe. The notion of using a tank, a symbol of war and military strength, as a tool of execution emerged in the 20th century as armoured vehicles became central to military doctrine. Tanks represented overwhelming force, industrial progress, and total destruction. To use them not merely on the battlefield but against defenceless individuals marked a disturbing perversion of their purpose. The psychology of this form of execution is particularly chilling. The condemned is made to lie on the ground, aware of the approaching machine. There is no ambiguity, no swift moment or unawareness. The method maximizes fear and helplessness. Victims often just have seconds to process their fate as the metal behemoth approaches, a slow, crushing inevitability. For witnesses, it is equally traumatic. It is not simply a death, it is annihilation, and often used in public to reinforce obedience and loyalty. The first alleged documented instances of death by tank occurred during World War II, particularly under the brutal policies of occupying regimes. However, these cases are harder to confirm due to limited records and wartime chaos. The Nazi SS and Soviet NKVD have been known to execute civilians and prisoners using various methods intended to instill fear. Some survivors of these confront atrocities have recounted partisans or civilians being crushed under tanks as collective punishment or in attacks of warfare. While not officially sanctioned, such acts were consistent with unrestrained violence of that front. In these cases, the tank was not just an instrument of death, it was a weaponized symbol of state machinery. It said, with steel and fire, resistance will not be met with mercy, but with machinery. Perhaps some of the most notorious cases of execution using a tank in recent decades come from North Korea. In 2019, reports emerged, though not independently verified, of Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un allegedly ordering the execution of military officers who had plotted against him. According to South Korean intelligence sources and defector testimonies, men were forced to stand in formation at a military training ground before being executed by anti-aircraft fire and tanks. One chilling account from a North Korean defector detailed how tanks were driven over the condemned multiple times, reducing their bodies to a red smear on the ground. The witnesses, hundreds of soldiers, were allegedly forced to watch as a lesson. According to the same report, the bodies were so mutilated that no remains were ever retrieved, and the area was immediately hosed down afterwards. The goal here was clear: eliminate dissent, not just through death but through obliteration. The use of a tank wasn't just functional, it was theatrical. It dramatised the fate of disobedience. While North Korea remains one of the most secretive regimes on earth, multiple defectors over the years have shared consistent stories about executions involving tanks, dogs, flamethrowers, and anti-aircraft guns. Each is meant to convey a message. In North Korea, there is no boundary the regime will not cross to ensure obedience. The rise of ISIS in Syria and Iraq saw a resurgence of medieval-style brutality, often shared via online propaganda videos. ISIS was known for crucifixions, beheadings, and immolation. Among the lesser-known methods employed by the terrorist group was the use of a tank to execute prisoners of war. In one alleged documented case from 2015, ISIS released a video depicting the execution of a captured Syrian soldier. The man was placed in the middle of a dirt road, bound and defenceless. A tank driven by an ISIS fighter then deliberately ran over his body. The video was staged with cinematic precision, including slow motion sequences and dramatic music. The intent was not just to kill, but to inspire fear, awe, and obedience amongst supporters and enemies alike. This was not a rogue act of cruelty, it was part of the group's carefully crafted image of absolute dominance and divine punishment. The tank in this case was a prop in the theatre of war. While no confirmed execution by tank took place during the 1989 Tiananmen Square massacre, the image of a tank rolling towards a human being remains seared into global consciousness. The iconic photo of Tank Man standing alone against a line of tanks became one of the most powerful symbols of non-violent resistance in history. There were, however, some unverified reports from eyewitnesses and foreign journalists that some protesters were crushed by the tanks during the PLA's violent suppression of the student movement. In the early hours of June the 4th, tanks and armoured personnel carriers rolled through the crowds at speed. Some accounts describe scenes of panic as people were mown down, with body parts strewn across the pavement. Although execution may not have been the intent, the incident shows how tanks, machines of war, were used domestically to enforce order, with deadly consequences. It cemented in public memory the psychological power of mechanised force against flesh and blood resistance. Execution by tank is unique, as it's never just about the act itself, it's always about a message. Hanging is final, shooting is swift, but being crushed beneath an armoured vehicle speaks to a deeper cultural fear, the fear of the machine, of being reduced to insignificance beneath wheels of steel. The execution method, if we can call it that, often appears where law has collapsed. There are no forms to fill out, no procedures to follow. It is execution or death by crushing, execution of the lawless by the lawless. In totalitarian regimes, it serves as a grotesque display of technological supremacy over individual life. The state doesn't need a gallows or a courtroom, it has tanks. It doesn't need justice, it has fear. In the 21st century, the use of tanks as execution devices is very rare, but not unimaginable. As long as conflicts rage and autocratic regimes retain unchecked power, the possibility remains. Indeed, the greatest horror may not be the method itself, but the psychology behind it. The view that a human being is so meaningless, so deserving of punishment, that they may be reduced to pulp beneath the treads of war. It was not just execution, it was erasure. International law, including the Geneva Conventions and the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, prohibits cruel and inhumane methods of execution, particularly those aimed at humiliating the victim or terrorising the public. Execution by tank would undoubtedly qualify. However, in war-torn regions or closed regimes, such norms are easily ignored. Human rights organisations have repeatedly condemned the use of brutal execution methods, urging governments to document abuses and hold perpetrators accountable. Yet in many cases such events are hidden, denied, or never ever recorded. Execution by tank, if we can call it an execution method, remains one of the most horrifying ways a state or group can kill. It strips a victim of identity, dignity, and humanity in a single crushing act. Unlike traditional execution methods, which at least maintain the veneer of justice, death beneath the treads of a tank is raw domination. It is spectacle over law, power over principle, and fear over fairness. While it has never been widespread, its presence in historical records, even if very sparse, is a chilling reminder of what governments and groups are capable of when unrestrained by law or morality. It is not just a method of execution, it is a warning etched in steel and blood. The machinery of the state, when unchecked, can flatten everything in its path, including human life itself. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.